Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be doing my power rankings for the 2023 Italian Grand Prix. Of course, as always, these power rankings will be not just the Italian Grand Prix, but the last several races as well. So starting in number 20, staying in the same position as last time, unfortunately for him, is Logan Sargent. So for Sargent, really tough weekend again. Out-qualified by his teammate Albon, I believe qualified 15th. And I think given Williams' expectations for this race, I think that just isn't good enough. The race, he made up a couple positions, looked like he might have had a chance at a 10th place finish. Had some kind of contact with Bottas. I still have not been able to find a replay of the incident, even after scouring YouTube to try to find a replay of it. But nonetheless was given a 5-second penalty for that incident, and subsequently dropped down the order a bit. And yeah, well off the pace of his teammate Albon last pretty much the entire season, and it hasn't really been getting closer lately. Number 19, dropping one position. For this I really have to rant about this driver here. Lance Stroll. So, Saturday, out-qualified by Alonso by 1.3 seconds, qualified dead last in 20th, whereas Alonso made Q3. Just really isn't good enough. And I know it's a difficult track to overtake on, given how DRS is not as useful as it is at other tracks, but still definitely not good enough. And it's something that he's really going to have to try to sort out for the last 8 races of the season. The race, can't really comment on. I think he was a little bit better. But that being said, the only drivers he finished ahead of were the 2 Haas drivers, who, of course, as we know, have really, really poor tire management. And also, I know he missed all of Friday, basically with losing FP1, giving the seat to Drogovic, and then missing FP2 because of some kind of car issue, but still not good enough, I think. Number 18, moving up one position, and this is mostly just because I felt Stroll had to be moved down, is Zhou Guangyu. So for Zhou, out-qualified by his teammate Bottas and beaten in the race by Bottas as well. So I felt not a particularly great weekend from him, but still moves out courtesy of Stroll having such a poor weekend. Number 17, moving down one position, is Kevin Magnussen. So race day, I think, was pretty much a write-off for both Haas drivers. They were both the only 2 drivers to finish a lap down. That being said, got knocked out in Q1 and was out-qualified again by his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. And I think, unfortunately for Haas, because their Sundays recently have been so anonymous, so difficult, it really makes the only way that we can really differentiate their drivers is through their qualifying performance, which is definitely where Magnussen's been struggling a lot relative to Hülkenberg. Number 16, moving up one position in his second ever F1 race, is Liam Lawson. So pretty decent race, I think, for Lawson. Qualifying was much better than last weekend. Was only about a 10th and a half off his teammate Tsunoda. Unfortunately for us, we couldn't get a comparison between himself and Tsunoda in the race, as Tsunoda's car basically went kaboom before the race even started. But still, I thought had a really good race. I thought could have gotten a points finish if he had been able to make that one-stop strategy work. Unfortunately, going the 2-stop strategy meant he had to overtake other cars. But still, I think he finished 12th on the road and then moved up to 11th because of Piastri getting a 5-second penalty. But still, pretty good result for him, and basically he looks like an F1 driver, I think. Number 15, dropping 4 positions, is Esteban Ocon. So for the Alpines, their pace this past weekend was absolutely awful. I think we knew this race was going to be a challenge for them given their lack of straight line speed. But that being said, I do think the drivers could have been slightly better, especially in qualifying. There was drivers who had, both drivers I think had lap times deleted from the session for track limits infringements, which contributed to them qualifying so low. They also made a couple of mistakes in qualifying, which contributed to that really low grid position. The race day, can't really say for Ocon. I know he tried to do something different with the strategy, so at one point he was up in the points. But That being said, really struggle overall. Don't really hold it too much against either driver, as we knew this is a track that they wouldn't do particularly well at, but nonetheless not a great result for Ocon. Number 14. Let's see, number 14. And pretty much staying in the same position as last week, and that's almost entirely based on his qualifying performances, is Nico Hülkenberg. Finished, he would have finished 17th, I believe, on the road, but not a great result on Sunday, but still qualifying's been a bright spot for him. And generally, for Hülkenberg, we know the limitations of the car on Sunday, but still the Saturday performances have been pretty good. Number 13, a driver who didn't even get to participate in the race, is Yuki Tsunoda. So I feel Tsunoda out-qualified his teammate. Maybe he would be hoping that the margin's a little better, but still you have to remember it's Monza. There's only like 11 corners in the whole circuit. It's mostly straights. So really there's not as many corners to lose lap time in. So a 10.5 seconds, not great, but it's also, maybe he would hope it's a little bit bigger, but still not terrible. And in the race, of course, can't really say much. But that being said, recently he's been done, I think, what has been asked of him. Number 12, really excellent race, I thought, for this driver, salvaging a point, and that's Valtteri Bottas. Gets that 10th place finish, had a couple good battles. I'm assuming the one with Sargent, which we never saw on TV. But still, nonetheless, really good result. Out-qualified and beat his teammate Joe in both qualifying and the race. Number 11, moving up one position, and these are the kinds of performances that Perez needs to be having. So for Perez, qualified fifth, and finished second on the road, which is exactly what he needs to be doing. Even if he doesn't qualify in the front row, top three, it's not a big deal as long as he's able to get those positions back in the race. And finishing P2 is exactly what he needs to be doing. So pretty good result for Perez relative to pretty much the whole rest of the European calendar. Not particularly surprised. I did predict Perez on my podium in my predictions for the weekend because it is a real limited circuit, which he generally does tend to do pretty well at. Next weekend is Singapore, which of course is a race he won last year, so that's of course going to be a big challenge for him. The last thing I'll say about Perez, made some really good overtakes, overtook 3 cars on track, Sainz, Leclerc, and Russell, so pretty good job from Perez. Number 10, moving down 4 positions, and a lot about what I'm about to say about Gasly in 10th really applies the same as Ocon. Qualifying, I think, was not great between mistakes and track limits deletions. Qualifying was a struggle. However, he did out-qualify his teammate Ocon. That being said, I do feel like the drivers ahead of him did have a very good weekend. In the race, was very anonymous. We couldn't really see much of him on the broadcast, and he was not really able to make up many positions either. Number 9, dropping 2 positions, but I don't think this driver had a particularly bad race, and that's Oscar Piastri. So for Piastri, out-qualified his teammate Norris, which is definitely a really good sign that he's getting closer to Norris in the race. I think on race pace, though, it was pretty clear that Norris did have the upper hand in the race pace. Unfortunately for Piastri, he was very unfortunate to basically be cut off by Hamilton when they were battling side by side. And of course, I think he was a little bit lucky as well in his fight with Norris that neither of them ended up with damage there. Of course, he later got a penalty for cutting the chicane, which dropped him behind Lawson, I believe. And no points as well. So overall, not a great result. I think the race pace, he's still learning. He's still trying to get there. But I think the signs are there and the growth is there as well. Number 8, really good race from this driver. George Russell, moving up 2 positions from last week. Finished P5, I believe, which I really think is the best result that Mercedes could have gotten this weekend. He qualified really well, out-qualified Perez in qualifying, and then in the race kind of tried to hold up Perez for as long as he could, and then after that really just ran his own race. I know he got that 5-second penalty for cutting the chicane, which is consistent with pretty much every other driver who did that same action. That being said, I do think that he did have a very good race. Number 7, moving up 1 position, and I think You may ask, why is he behind Sainz? Leclerc did look like he had a better pace in the race, and I'll explain that a bit later. But for Leclerc, qualified third, I think a little bit disappointing. I think he would have wanted to out-qualify Sainz. In the race, he did look pretty good, looked very aggressive, trying to make moves, especially on his teammate Sainz. But that being said, I think he'll be a bit disappointed that he was the one Ferrari driver who wasn't on the podium. And at the end of the day, he couldn't get that move to move on to the podium. So moving up 3 positions, I think one of the best drivers of the weekend, I believe one of the highest spots he's gotten on my power rankings this year is Carlos Sainz. So for Sainz, gets pole position, I think really, really excellent job there, qualifying Leclerc and Verstappen. And in the race, I really think he did as well as he could. I do think that ultimately the race pace was a little bit lacking compared to Leclerc, but that being said, this was a very difficult track to overtake on, but he defended his position and he even led the race for 15 laps. So nonetheless, really good result for Sainz, and he moves up in my power rankings. Number 5, dropping down 1 position is Lewis Hamilton. So for Hamilton, I think this will definitely not be one of his a weekend for him that he'll remember long term from all the races of his career, all the races from this season. Qualifying was a bit of a struggle. Didn't qualify particularly well. Was out qualified by his teammate. The race, he moved up position, started on the alternative strategy. He of course made that somewhat controversial move on Piastri. Basically took out Piastri's front wing, cutting across at turn 4. I do think that the penalty was a little bit lenient, I guess I would say. I've seen much less bad moves. I would say terrible grammar, I know, but I've seen much worse, less worse being penalized about the same. So I do think for Hamilton, given how severely he cut across, making to defend that position, to make that move, I do think it could have warranted a bit of a harsher penalty, like a 10-second penalty, for example. That being said, that when he, outside of that penalty, he did have a very good pace throughout the whole race, and easily overtook Norris and easily overtook Albon as well to finish 6th on the road and negate the penalty that he had, but still not a fantastic result. Now this is where it gets tricky. Drivers 2, 3, and 4 I felt were really, really close together. And it was hard for me to say what order I should put them in. So number 4, dropping 2 positions, but still a really good result, is Lando Norris. Finishing, let's see, 8th on the road for Norris. Good result for him. I think in qualifying, they were really struggling with top-end speed. In the race, they did look like they had better race pace and better tire management compared to the Williams of Albon, but still, couldn't make a move stick because of that lack of top-end speed. And even though he was out-qualified by his teammate in qualifying, the race, I did feel like Norris was the better driver of the 2. Number 3, staying in the same position, and even though this weekend wasn't a particularly good result in terms of points, I do feel like Fernando Alonso did make the most of the weekend. I think it was very clear after qualifying that the Aston Martin was not a particularly good car this weekend. Based on Stroll qualifying dead last. But that being said, Alonso did manage to get the car into Q3. I know he qualified 10th and managed to get 9th place, which would have been in 10th place if Piastri hadn't had to pit for a new front wing. That being said, for Alonso, I did think he did the best as he could, was kind of just driving in no man's land the whole race. And he'll be just kind of trying to keep going at the bit, getting as many points as he possibly can to try to finish 3rd in the constructors, third in the Drivers' Championship at the end of the year. The last 2 drivers, I think we all know who's number 1 is going to be, but number 2, I think an absolutely fantastic weekend overall, and 2 really good weekends on the bounce, is Alex Albon. So finished qualified 6th, I believe, and finished in 7th place. So really good result for Albon. I think both him and the team will be really happy with that. And I think now, not certainly, but I think they have an excellent chance of getting 7th place in the Constructors' Championship now. Out qualifying and out racing Sargent by a massive margin as well doesn't hurt either. So a really good weekend overall for Albon to move up 3 positions. And of course, number one, as it's been for pretty much the majority of the season, is Max Verstappen. Didn't get pole position, which I guess you could hold against him. I do think that pole was there for the taking. But that being said, the race was basically impeccable. Basically sat behind Sainz as long as he needed to, and when Sainz's tires started to degrade, and he was able to build basically a pace delta to Sainz, waited for Sainz to make a mistake, which he did at turn 1 on lap 15, and duly took the lead of the race at turn 3. And from there, he didn't really look back. I know it seemed like he had some kind of issue at the end because he only finished about 6 seconds ahead of Perez. But still, very, very good race from Verstappen to get the all-time consecutive wins record of 10 wins in a row. So now the question is, how many wins will it get to? Will it stop at 10? Will it go to the end of the season, get all the way to 18? Will it continue into the next season? So I really think that's my question for the end of this power rankings. How many wins do you think Verstappen's wins record will get to? Thank you so much for watching. Of course, we now have a 2-week break until the Singapore Grand Prix in let's see, when of that's going to be the 17th of September, I believe. So I'll be probably trying to do a couple videos between now and then, a couple interesting ones that I've thought about. So it'll be fun to do those. So again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.